the members for taking time out to participate in one of COSBAE CWAE track session. And this is the one that we feature um, our mentoring initiative recipients. And so the two participants today are individuals that won the Outstanding Young Professional Award last year. So this is some of the things that we like to do to, once we've had people to, once we identify young, outstanding teachers, faculty members, we would like to continue to feature them, continue to put them before the association so everybody can get to know them and they can know the excellent work that they're doing. And so we are working with these individuals, also mentoring these individuals and trying to make sure that we provide any type of guidance and any type of assistance that they may need as they go on their career in research, teaching, extension, administration, so on and so forth. So I'd like to first introduce you to Dr. Miche. He's a faculty member at the Florida A&M University. He's been there a few years, and he's doing some excellent research and making some excellent contribution there at Florida A&M University. As I mentioned earlier, he's one of our recipients of the 2019 Outstanding Young Professional. Today he will talk about R&D, education and trade openness, implication for agricultural productivity, convergency in Latin America. So I told him I was excited about the topic, and I was just looking forward to his talk. And so let's give him a warm welcome. And there you are, Doc. Take it away.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for being here for my talk. One thing before I start, can you hear me well? Because I have a fan that is making noise because it's very hot. I don't know if I have to turn it off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay, sometimes I will turn it off, sometimes I will turn it on when I start sweating. Okay, so the title of my talk is R&D, Education and Trade Openness, Implications for Agricultural Productivity Convergence in Latin America. So I made a slight change because before it was extension, I replaced extension by education. Will countries with poor agricultural sectors still have poor ones for many generations? Will the countries that have the most developed ones still have the best ones in 50 years? In other words, how do we explain the growth process or specific growth paths? I mean, these questions address the notion of convergence that we're going to discuss today. And they are important because faster economic growth rates would lead to improvements in social welfare, which is the main goal of most policymakers. The study focuses on agriculture in Latin America and the Caribbean because of the importance of the sector in the region and also for the world. For example, in 2017, farming accounted for 38% of the land in the region, and the region produces about 23% of global agricultural exports while employing 60% of the workforce in the region. Agriculture in the region also represents 15% of the world's farm area while generating 33% of its water. However, agriculture in the region faces several challenges. First one is climatic variability, which is different than climate change. By climatic variability, I mean year-to-year fluctuations in temperature, and precipitation that are expected to have repercussions in production decision, choice, and use of inputs, and also agricultural productivity. Also, it seems that the region underinvested in R&D, and R&D investment is quite heterogeneous in the sense that I believe 3 countries in the region, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, account for nearly 75% of the total R&D spending. Also, several studies have reported TFP gaps across countries in the region, significant variability in TFP growth, and even low rates of TFP growth in the region. So in this study, we are interested in knowing whether country in the region can increase and sustain agricultural TFP level while reducing its dispersion over time. This is known in the literature as absolute sigma convergence. Another policy question is whether country with initial lower TFP level growth can go faster than higher ones. And this is known as beta convergence. And finally, what would happen to TFP growth if countries increase R&D spending, invest more in education, and adopt trade policy toward openness? And this is known as conditional beta convergence. We have 2 objectives. First, we want to compute a climatic adjusted total factor productivity. We call it CATFP. And then we want to investigate whether CATFP is converging in the region. Why having a climatic adjusted TFP? First, is because in order to design policy instruments to improve resiliency of agriculture, it is important to assess the impact of climatic variable on output and on productivity. Another reason is because also the exclusion of climatic variables in the production function is an example of omitted variable problem, and this can lead to biased parameter estimate and then to misleading TFP measures. So how do we proceed? First, we estimate random parameter stochastic production frontier models, and then we use those estimates to compute TFP. And finally, we use cross regressions and recent panel data techniques to investigate CATFP convergence. And what we found is CATFP are not absolutely converging in the region. However, they are conditionally converging, and R&D spending, education, and trade openness have positive impacts on CATFP growth in both the short one and the long one. So, first, we assume that the underlying technology of the production process can be estimated by a Cobb-Douglas function, as shown in equation 1, when YIT is the output of country I at time t. And on the right-hand side, we have alpha I, which captures country time invariant heterogeneity. The X represent a set of conventional inputs using production. T, we include the time trend that captures technological progress. The Z are climatic variables. The VIT are the usual noise, the error term, and UIT captures technical inefficiency. The difference between equation 1 and the standard stochastic production frontier in the literature, as you can see, is we allow the beta I to be random across countries. After estimating the model, we calculate CATFP, which is the ratio of output over input as shown in equation 2. So the TFP index that compares CATFP of country I at time t with the CATFP of country M at time s can be expressed as in equation 3, where Q and X are aggregate output and aggregate input functions that are assumed to be non-decreasing, non-negative, and linear homogeneous. This is one of the reasons why we do not use a translog functional form. Given the assumptions about Q and X and the Cobb-Douglas functional form, the CATFPIT can be decomposed into different measures of efficiency. For example, the first term on the right hand captures country heterogeneity, such as soil quality or agroclimatic conditions that we do not capture in the data. The second term is a relative measure of scale efficiency. The third term is a relative measure of technological progress. The fourth one captures climatic effects. The fifth one captures noise in the data, and the last one is a relative measure of technical efficiency. So after estimating the model, we use the model to, we investigate whether CATFP in the region is converging. Recall that sigma convergence means that countries are able to reduce their fee gaps over time. So we use equation 5 to assess if CATFP are converging, where the left-hand side is the variance of countries, of all countries at time t. And if we have absolute sigma convergence, the estimated parameter of theta 2 should be negative. Likewise, beta convergence indicates that countries with lower CATFP go relatively faster than those with higher ones. That means there is an inverse relationship between the initial level of CATFP in 1981 and CATFP growth. And finally, what we do to assess conditional convergence, we use an error correction model, ACM. So the ACM is a framework that allows estimating both short-term and long-term effects of policy variables, in our case, R&D, education, and trade openness, on the variable of interest, which is in our context, CATFP. And omega IT is the error correction, and it represents deviations from the long-run relationship. So we use this long-term relationship to derive the error correction model that we have in equation 8. So there are a few things I want to say about this slide. The first thing is the blue terms capture the short-term effects, and the red terms capture the long-run effects. However, if we want to capture long-run elasticities, we will need to divide the omega 1, omega 2, omega 3, the long-run coefficient, by phi, where phi is the adjustment coefficient that measures the speed at which CATFP level converge to the steady states. This is the data we use for the model, okay? We have data from 1981 to 2012. We have data for 10 countries, and the reason why we're using data for 10 countries is because R&D data for the region are available only for 1981 to 2012, okay? We have one output, and we have 6 conventional inputs: machinery, fertilizer, animal stock, feed, land, labor. And for climatic variables, we have 5, okay? We want to capture impacts of climate condition and also climatic variability on agricultural production. Because of that, we include annual average temperature, and we also include temperature anomaly. We do the same for precipitation, and we also include the number of rainy days as a measure of precipitation intensity. Anomaly in our case is defined as the deviation of each annual observation from a long-term mean, and that long-term mean is considered to be 1901 to 2012. We also have 3 policy variables. We have R&D, which is public spending in R&D, We have education, which is also public spending in education that exclude capital investment in building and equipment. And we have trade openness, which is the trade to GDP ratio, which is the measure of importance of trade in the economy. And the data are from different sources, FAO, the Climate Research Unit, IFPRI, and the World Development Indicators. So we're gonna go over some results right now. We estimated two models. The first model is without climatic variables and the second one with climatic variables, okay? And we compare those two models using a likelihood ratio test, okay? And the likelihood ratio test shows that the model with climatic variables outperform the model without climatic variables. That means when we estimate a production function, we need to include climatic variables in the estimation. And the result also showed that temperature and precipitation and rainy days, they have positive impact on production. The problem is with temperature anomaly and precipitation anomaly. So this graph just showed the cumulative CATFP over time and its different components: technical efficiency, technological progress, scale efficiency, and climatic effects. So the big picture here is to see that total factor productivity in the region is mainly driven by technological progress. Here we show the results at the country level, okay? We use Brazil as the reference country and 1981 as the reference year. As you could see, the average CATFP growth in the region is 1.61%, and Costa Rica has the highest CATFP growth rate, followed by Brazil and Chile, okay? Technological progress is the main driver, averaging 1.73% per year, and all the other components negatively contribute to total factor productivity. Another thing to notice is the impact of climatic variability across countries are unevenly distributed, positive for some countries and negative for others. So the next step is to test for convergence. We test for sigma convergence. First, we estimated the model without the time break, and we noticed that the estimated parameter does not have the expected sign. It's positive, okay? If it is negative, that means there is dispersions. That means TFP gaps are decreasing over time. We then re-estimated the model, use accounting for structural break. We found that there was a structural break in 1999, which is a period of structural reform in the region. When we account for that, we notice that the time trend has not the expected sign. However, it's not significant. That means CATFP in the regions are not absolutely sigma converging. Likewise, we do the same for absolute beta convergence. As you notice, the estimated parameter associated with the initial CATFP level, not only it's positive, but it's not significant. That means we do not have absolute beta convergence in the region. There are two implications of those results, okay? The first implication is countries in the region will not converge, CATFP will not converge without government interventions. Okay, to have convergence, governments need to implement specific policies. And the second implication of those results, CATFP in the region would converge toward different steady state. That means they will have different long-run equilibrium. Because of that, the next step is to test whether CATFP are conditionally converging. So before assessing the conditional convergence, we first run unit root tests and also co-integration tests. As you could see in table 6, first we found all the variables are non-stationary. However, they are stationary in phase difference, except for the variable education that is stationary in second difference. We found that all the variables were co-integrated, and therefore we can estimate the error correction model. So for the error correction model, we estimate two models. We estimate a pool mean group model, and we also estimate a mean group model, okay? The difference between the two is the PMG assume that the long run coefficients across country are homogeneous. That means they are the same across countries. However, the MG model assumes that there is homogeneity in long run coefficients and also in the short run coefficients. So we compare those two models using a Hostman test, and the Hostman test favors the PMG model. So the analysis is based on the PMG model. So I'm gonna say a few things about this table. The first thing is, if you look at the phi, it is negative and significant. That means CATFP are conditionally converging, and CATFP are below the equilibrium value. Okay, and it also means that 59.5% of disequilibrium observed in a particular year, this disequilibrium will be dissipated by the next period. Another thing, if you notice, you will see all the policy variables, R&D, education, and trade openness, they are significant in the short run and in the long run. That means they are contributing to CATFP growth, and also they play a big role in pushing forward the steady state level in the long run. I'm going to interpret just one coefficient. For example, if you look at the short run coefficient for R&D, it is 0.523. That means if we increase the spending of R&D by 10%, it will increase productivity growth by 5.23%. And if we want to find the long run elasticity, what we should do is to take the long run growth coefficient, which is 0.16, and divide it by the error correction, 0.595, and that will give you 0.27. What it means also is, if we increase the spending in R&D by 10%, it will push forward this steady state level by 2.8%. And we can do the same for all the other variables, education, and also trade openness. Okay. I'll move to conclusion. So basically what we have learned is, if we exclude climatic variables in the production function, that will lead to bias estimates and thus to misleading TFP measures. We also found that climatic variability has negative effects on production and productivity. And this impact is unevenly distributed across country and also across time. We also found that technological progress has been the key driver of productivity. And countries in the region, CATFP productivity will not converge without targeted policy. And we also found that R&D spending, education spending, and policy toward trade openness have positive impact on CATFP growth in the short run and also in the long run. And therefore, government should foster research in agriculture, and R&D spending needs to be oriented towards new technology that can make crops more resilient to climatic variability, given the negative impacts. The R&D spending also needs to be oriented toward increasing the absorptive capacity of existing technology to promote technical efficiency gains because we found that technical efficiency negatively contribute to productivity, and technical efficiency captures managerial skills and also the capacity of a country to absorb technology. And I think that's it. So if you have any questions, I can go over a few things with more details.
Okay.
Yeah.
May I just start just by thanking you so much for a wonderful presentation. I thought it was very well explained and a very interesting work that I think that I hope will be published soon. So I hope you're working on that.
Yes.
So the government investing in R&D, I guess one of the assumptions that I would like to make is that means that the government is also investing in education more. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, good. And the question that I had for you, the real question that I had for you is what recent policy that you know of have contributed considerably toward trade openness in Latin America? And are there any recognizable changes in job creation and poverty reduction that you know of in Latin America? And it may be tough.
Yeah, it's tough and it's kind of beyond the scope of the work.
Okay.
Okay. But what I would say though is the results show that trade openness will have positive impact on productivity growth in the short run, and it will also move outward the steady state. Okay. We also know that trade openness can also make agricultural products more competitive, and it can also facilitate access to more efficient use of domestic resources, and it can also provide a larger set of inputs for producers. Okay, but in our case, so we're using aggregate output. So in order to know like a specific policy in the region, it needs to be at the country level, because trade openness is like the ratio of import export over GDP. Yeah, that means each country will need to identify the more valuable export products. For countries like Brazil, Argentina, it could be to focus more on soybeans, wheat, corn. Whereas for countries like in Latin America, Guatemala, Honduras, it could be more like coffee, bananas, sugar, you know. But in terms of employment, we did not capture anything about that in our results. Yeah.
No, I was just mainly thinking about the trade agreements that have been established by, Brazil and some of the other countries, Latin American countries, recently, in the impact those things are having on China. Latin America is sending a lot over to China now, and so I just, I was just wondering if there are anything that you can think of, and just knowing that trade is increasing quite a bit in Latin America, could, somehow you can make some assumption that it has to be, have an impact upon labor, as well as poverty, given that, more people are working, and which also could, you can make the assumption that their income is increasing, or more people have jobs or have availability of income. And so that can somehow have an impact on poverty reduction, as well as, job creation.
This is true, and this is with the questions like we started, because the idea of the convergence is to accelerate growth, you know,
Yes.
and if we, yeah, and if we could accelerate growth, this will increase social welfare or
Yes.
well-being, that will contribute to poverty reduction, and also that will also contribute somehow to employment, because countries will be able to make a better use of the domestic resources.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hi, yeah, this is Zoe. I can unmute my video, whatever that term is. Hi there. This is really interesting, and I appreciated this presentation a lot. A couple of questions, related questions, about, my knowledge is more about U.S. Agricultural productivity, and something that we've seen here in terms of R&D is a lot more of the spending is now coming from the private sector than it is from the government. And I'm curious what that balance, like what the kind of mix is in the countries within your study, and if you are, if you only have the public R&D spending, or you also have private spending, and if you have both and can tease them out, would it be interesting, I was thinking it might be interesting to explore how that matters, where that spending is coming from.
That is true. In my case, it's a lack of data, okay? But there are a lot of studies out there, especially for the US. I mean, we have a lot of data here, where when they try those studies that investigate the impact of R&D on productivity, not only they include public R&D, they also include private R&D, and they also include spillover effects of R&D from one state to another state. So they usually look at three components to have a full picture of R&D. And another thing as well, I would say, in my case, given data constraints, I just assume it will take 10 years for R&D to become a stock of useful knowledge. Because when you just invest in R&D, you're not going to see the impact immediately on productivity. It's going to take a few years. So I just limited myself to 10 years. But here in the US, not only they have those two components, but studies show that it could take up to 50 years. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that starts, your answer raised more questions for me, interesting questions that I feel like you could explore around, like kind of related to Chris's questions about trade policy. There's also like regulatory policy around the approval of certain types of products and things like that. And that, I think that length of time is part of what determines that R&D length. So looking at how different, comparing across countries, of how also explore, it seemed like the next paper, right? Which is, okay, this says increase R&D, like how do we think about that? So thank you.
Yeah, that's true, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? I hate to call up them in one, but Keithley Jones, Dr. Jones has done a study, was doing a study with trade openness before he left ERS. And I was just wondering if he had any suggestions or comments relative to trade openness. Okay, maybe he's stepped away for a second. Anyone else? Andrew, any comments?
No comments. I just thought it was a real good study.
Okay. Thank you. And sorry for the noise. I mean, sometimes I have to turn off the fan turn it off when it's get hot. Yeah. So it's just hot where I am. Yeah.
Listen, don't feel bad. I have mine on, so they could be hearing mine as well. So if there are no other questions, we could go ahead and move on to our next presentation. And if you think of any questions, please write them down. And at the end, maybe we'll have time to go back to address those questions that you have.
Okay.
So our next presenter that I would like to introduce to you is Dr. Money. He's from the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff, who is also one of COSBAE CWAE 2019 Outstanding Young Professionals. And he's been doing some very interesting work. I had some questions for him earlier. I was talking to him about it. And I think his unique work, and I'm sure he'll get into more details with you about his work. But I'm just excited about it. And let me just introduce his title, or just tell you his title. He's looking at the economic analysis of raw rice production system. Do we have the data? And I thought that was a very interesting title. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say and him going into all the details as to how he's going to get the data. So, all right. Thank you so much. Let's welcome Money.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate for the brief introduction, and I hope everyone can hear me. So, well, you know, I have been doing this work for past 3 years, and it has been quite challenging when we really look into the data and what all information we can gather over a period of time. And that really gives you an idea how some research topics are really difficult to handle and some are quite easy. And then we'll look into what are the challenges I have with my research. Just to give you an idea, I've been working with a team from University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, and Rice Research and Extension Center in Stuttgart. I work with Dr. Brad Watkins. He's a production economist, and Dr. Chris Henry, who is an irrigation expert at the Rice Research and Extension Center in Stuttgart. So just to give you a brief idea, overview of my presentation, I'll have a brief introduction as to what do you mean by raw rice production system. I'll talk about my research objectives. I'll talk about my data and methodology. Then I will see, just give you a snapshot at what results and conclusions I have got with respect to the current research I have been doing. And then in summary of key findings, I will just throw some light on the problems I had in gathering the data for my research. And finally, I'll conclude with the future research as to what we really need to be looking into with respect to the raw rice production system. So to start with, we have been growing rice for centuries, decades, but in Arkansas, a typical raw rice production system is not something you have been quite familiar with. We grow rice in Arkansas by building up levees, and then you put water all across the levees, and then you flood the levees with water, and it stays in the field for the entire production cycle. And you drain the fields, and then you go and harvest it. So this is the way we have been doing rice production in Arkansas for a while. There was some earlier, experiment with the growing rice, the way we have been growing soybeans, corn, by growing it in ridges and furrows. Okay, you can't say ridges and furrows because it doesn't have that much of. These are quite shallow ridges. So we grow rice in furrows, just like the way we have been growing soybeans. And this production system is not new. They had tried to grow rice earlier, But the challenges was that there was a lot of disease, and the disease was blast. We had a lot of blast, and that disease was quite damaging to the overall production of rice. So we stopped it. But what happened lately with the introduction of hybrids, we really went back because we have an excellent disease package by which we can grow rice the way we have been growing soybeans. Now, just to give you a brief idea how big the rice production in Arkansas is, typically we grow about 1.4 million acres of rice. Majority of it is long grain, some short grain, and then whatever remaining is medium grain. You know, just to look at the numbers, how are we doing with this new production system? In 2017, we had 40,000 acres. Right now, we have gone close to about 200,000 acres. So more or less more than 10%. We have really got lot many acres in a very short period of time. Whatever knowledge we have available with raw rice production system is really looking into the potential savings we get through water. And water is one of the most valuable resources we are really looking into when we look at this production system. The other aspect we have that really favors raw rice is it requires less time to prepare. So if you are preparing a field after growing soybeans, all you need to know is that you need to have 1 or 2 passes and you are pretty much ready for raw rice production, planting the raw rice. The most important factor that really got attention in this production system is use of hybrids. So with hybrids, we have an excellent disease package. So that issue we had with the blast is gone, and we are really doing good with the introduction of hybrids in our production system. There is elaborative information on managing furrow irrigated rice with some agronomy publications, and then there is pretty much a new handbook on furrow irrigated rice, which is raw rice. So a lot of information has been coming out there, and we are quite familiar with the overall production system from every aspect, from production, you know, from, you know, in that production system, we are talking about a fertilizer, pesticide, and so forth. So the objective of this research project is quite simple. We are going to look into the profitability of raw rice with the other production system. And the other production system is the conventional way, you know, you grow, the way you were growing rice earlier. And that is you flood the field and you have those levees built upon. And we are going to look into how profitable is raw rice. But we are going to look into 3 different aspects. One is how much water are we using in this production system? Is it how much inputs are we using? And the last and the most important aspect of all is net returns. Are we making profit at end of the day when we adopt this new production system? So the data we have been really gathering is pretty much we have since 2016 we had paired 9 fields. Then in 2017 we went to 6 fields. In 2018 we went to 4, and in 2019 we went to 1 field. And now in 2020, again, we are back with 9 fields. So what does this field means? It's a paired study. So you're going to have a field with flooded rice on one side, and you have a field with raw rice on the one side. So it means that you're comparing apple to apple. The good part of this research is that this is actual field level data where a producer is doing this production. It's not a research plot. So typically these fields are about 30 to 60 acres. So these are quite huge fields. And I mean, this is actual field data we are using in our research. The methodology we use is we have the enterprise budget. We have modified the budget a little bit to accommodate whatever the changes we have in raw rice production system, and we compare that budget with the conventional flood or the conventional or the flooded field, and we compare these 2 fields and we try to see which one is profitable. So what we found out, and this research has been done in collaboration with irrigation engineers and irrigation experts. So we got a lot more data on water use. And what we see is that if you just look at this graph on this primary axis, you have bushels per acre. And on the secondary axis, you have acre inches of water used. So if you just see that, how many acre inches of water we have been using, it's all across, it's going up and down. And at some point you would see that, that there is pretty much more or less water used in either production system. What's interesting to see in this graph is you see that row rice yields have a drag of say about 5 bushels, 5 to 6 bushels on an average. So when you look at the blue bar, that's the row rice yield, and the blue bar, that's the flooded rice. That's the conventional way we have been growing rice. Obviously, we are having a yield drag, but what we see is that that yield drag is, really not the major factor we are looking into this. What we are looking is how much water are we saving. So, you can see that the red dotted lines pretty much tells what is the water used for row rice and the blue for flooded rice. In majority of the cases, we see the blue line over the red line. So pretty much you say you are saving some water, that would be 5 acre inch. But I mean, the question we need to ask ourselves is, this is a new production system. It's a trial and error, and majority of these recommendations as to how to grow row rice are not yet finalized. It means that every individual participating in this study is making decisions either based on his own experience, a suggestion from a peer, or possibly some consultant is helping him in making those decisions as to how to manage row rice production system. So we are scattered all across with respect to water use. So we were really concerned into looking into, well, let's look at every input that is used into this production system and try to make sense that, is this production system something we should really think about? So what we see, the blue bars are pretty much, highlighting the row rice, and the red are the furrow irrigated rice, sorry, the flooded rice. So what you see, just if we look at the, the cost per acre for use of NPK varies from $57 per acre to $115. So if you just try to average it out across all fields, it's $77, which is again less as compared to the verification fields. Now, what are verification fields? These fields are the standard way of growing rice. I mean, these are kind of benchmark. So if you see there is, pretty much they are a little bit less than what the verification fields are with respect to use of NP and K. Now, with respect to cost of herbicides, when I mean chemical, I'm talking about herbicide, insecticides, and fungicides. So let's put all these chemicals together. So what you find is that, again, the per acre cost is pretty much from $62 to $116, and there is quite a variation. Again, this is a function of what that producer was getting his extension input, such as, who was advising him, who was providing him with the information on growing row rice. So that is pretty much determining what's happening, that there is wide variation in the cost of chemical used per acre. If you look at the benchmark fields, whatever we say, this is the golden standard, you see the cost is a little bit higher. But if you just look into just the cost of herbicide, and this is one of the major expense we have in growing rice, and the cost of herbicide, we can see that their average is really higher as compared to the verification fields. So we can pretty much make a very kind of a solid conclusion on this, is that yes, the cost of herbicide is overall high because with the conventional production system, the rice is flooded, so there is no chance of weed popping out other than the aquatic weeds. But with this production system, we have rice. I mean, it's in a kind of, it is flooded, but it is not flooded the way it has been flooded with the conventional way. So you pretty much keep the water into those rows, and once the water dries down, again you flood it. So there is constant maintain of moisture at the root level, but it is not the way we have been doing conventionally. So the next and the most important aspect of this study is we really need to know that did we have that profit on this production system when we compare it to the conventional one. So what we see is $38 per acre on one field and $353 on another field. So wide variation. And this wide variation is again attributed to the input these producers are receiving. Majority of them, they would really go into raw rice production system because, well, their neighbor said, why don't you try by putting some acres into this production system and let's see how it goes. Well, where is he getting all that input to put this raw rice production system in place? Possibly his neighbor is advising him, or he may go and talk to a county extension agent who may refer him to a third person who has been doing raw rice. So that knowledge on this production system is, I mean, nothing was available, I would say so, that was really something which was tested and verified. So everyone was doing it their own way. Some people had 2 years of experience and they were really getting better at it. Now this producer who had $353 per acre, that guy had an experience of 2 years. On those 2 years of growing raw rice, he just barely made some profit in his first or second year. So I mean, his experience is also really coming handy when he's growing raw rice. So now this is what we talked about, the gold standard for growing rice, how much the net returns should be on per acre basis. It is quite high. And this is one of the reasons is that when we talk about conclusions, we would not say that this is something is, a solid production system, or we know everything about this production system. Why? Because there is quite variation in net returns from $38 to $353. So if you say, okay, were these results statistically different? No, they were not. What we really need at this point is a lot of additional data. These are several data points I picked out because that's what I got in my sample. So one of the most important challenge we got is when we do this data collection and when we get this producer to participate in our research, one of the biggest challenge we have is the producer's willingness to participate. Most important aspect of all is we need to have certain records, such as how much input was used on the flooded field and the raw rice field. Without that input data, we can't really have any economic analysis. And our biggest challenge is getting that information. Majority of the producers at the start of the season, they are willing to work, and as the season goes by, they get really busy with their day-to-day schedule. And by the time it's Thanksgiving and Christmas, they really want to go and hunt rather than work with me and just give their information. So it's quite challenging to get that information from them. And the most important aspect is that when we look at any production system, we have to really look into how much water are we using, because of the depleting water levels in the Arkansas Delta. We have one of the major concern is conserving water resources. So we are trying to blend both productivity plus water use and trying to make sure that, we are really capturing that is this producer really using less water with this new production system, which we are advocating. The another challenge we got is a typical field visit is, it takes about 4 to 8 hours. And it's quite challenging that you pretty much spend one day, because these locations are scattered all over the state. So getting the flow meter there, getting it set up, going and talking to producers at regular intervals to make sure he's having the flow meter on, and communicating with him on use of inputs is another challenge. Majority of the times we would really prefer to do it by making a visit on the field and talking to him. It just helps us to just develop that relationship in which he's comfortable in sharing his information with us. The another challenge we got is it's very hard to have 40 to 60 acre field and that to a paired sample. I mean, you have to really convince the producer that, I need 2 fields side by side. I mean, how much is he willing to make that kind of, commitment on his own resources, that is going to have 2 fields next to each other. And these are actual fields, and he needs to be profitable on those 40 to 60 acre fields. That's his objective. But I mean, that is also challenging to convince them. But over a period of time, in past 3 years, it has taken a lot of efforts to convince them to put these flow meters and have a paired sample study. The another challenge we got is, at any point of time, there are a lot more operations happening on the farm. So again, it just delays our communication with the producer, because he's busy with some other operations, even when we are there for the field visit, and it may not really help us in achieving what data we want to get out of that. Again, one of the most key problem we got is that whenever we ask these producers, when we look at their results and we say, hey, I just want to know what was the reason you had application of herbicide at this point of time. Well, his majority of the times his answer is, well, my consultant told me, or possibly the county agent had some recommendations, or it was basically a peer with whom he hangs out telling him the use of herbicides at a certain time period. So the management system was really pretty much had influence of 3 different individuals. One was a county agent, crop consultant, and peers. The other most important aspect is that we needed to know exactly what's happening and how people are taking this new production system. So we hosted a roundtable conference in kind of a roundtable workshop at 2 locations in Arkansas. And we were just trying to get in knowing that, that exactly how comfortable are with this raw rice production system and what's their knowledge about the production system. And then we were just trying to just get their feedback and just trying to say, okay, how many of are really doing it the correct way, and how many of them are really just, they're not following the recommendations, or possibly they don't know what the raw rice production system is. So, so our future way, the way forward we are looking into is increasing producers' participation. This year we had 9 paired studies. We really want to look into multi-state studies, that the same work should be done in Louisiana, Mississippi, and we can compare the results across the state. How successful are we with that? I've approached multiple ag economists, production economists, and in Louisiana they are ready to do it, but again, things have really not like we don't have any right now any collaboration or any research going on together. The same thing is with Mississippi State. In Mississippi State, we had an agronomist who is interested in similar studies. But at this moment, if you ask, are there multi-state studies? No. What happens when doing research is that we get overexcited, at least I, and in my approach to this production system, I had one-to-one relationship with multiple farmers, those who are willing to share their data on their combine, on their tractor, to look into the fuel consumption with this production system, and was there, how much the fuel was used on combine, and look into was there any wear and tear on the combine, speed, efficiency, and so forth. Well, where did we end up? It's quite complicated than what we were really planning for, because we need a software or a tool which would help us to retrieve the data from the combine or from the tractor. And the most important part was we needed a dedicated person who really goes and resets the equipment and resets that, pretty much every tool on the tractor whenever he's doing a row rice a field followed by a flooded field. So that is something really did not, we are really planning to do that, but we really need resources to make this happen. So this is another objective we would be looking into future. So just to give you an idea, how applied are we with our research? We are more applied than ever, because this is a survey we did at 2019 workshop, and what we found out that majority of the producers are really interested in furrow irrigated rice. At the Stuttgart location, you see major driver is this 26% of individuals, they want less tillage, again, less fuel consumption. Major factor is labor, less labor. And then, ease with irrigation, no levies. Another most important contributing factor was this, you can use a ground application, you can use a ground rig instead of putting urea through a plane, and which is quite cheaper. We went to another location that was Jonesboro, and we did the same survey, same question. And what we found out, well, there is less tillage, pretty much you are pretty much saving 50% of the cost here, and then less labor. So just to put all these things, whatever I said, into one simple message is that, yeah, this row rice production system is quite, it's quite something the producers are looking into. But what we need is that we need that data as to use of chemicals, herbicide, pesticide, and all other information that really can make us sure that, whatever recommendations we are coming up with are really relevant to their production system. And most important is that they really make money at the same time when we talk about saving water. If we really look, if we can get that holy union of saving water on one end and higher net returns, this is the perfect system we can talk about. With that, I would like to end my presentation, and I would really like to thank the Arkansas Rice Research and Promotion Board for helping us with the travel and financial resources to do our research. Thank you, and I would like to open the floor for questions.
Hi, this is Zoe Plakius.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your presentation. I had a question about one of the things that I know is an issue with rice, and I have a little bit of experience with rice from working in California, are the kind of emissions issues related to rice. Now, in general, my understanding is if there's less flooding, there might be fewer kind of emissions issues like greenhouse gas emissions. But if there's burning as an alternative to other types of, getting rid of that debris, that burning can lead to air quality issues and greenhouse gas emissions issues. So I was wondering if you'd explored it all, even if this isn't an issue that farmers are as concerned about as we think about, trying to incentivize adoption of new practices, like how does this type of production system impact emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in rice production?
Yeah, Zoe, I think so. You had two questions. One was with the greenhouse emissions, and then the burning of the residue, the stock. So let me start with the greenhouse gases. So there is right now study done by Arkansas State University, what they have done is that they're working with only one farmer, and that farmer has dedicated a very large portion of his field to kind of, to grow raw rice. And they are really, they have about like, how many, 16 fields, pretty much the size I'm talking 30 to 40 acre fields. And they have all scientific gadgets put on those fields, and they are looking into these greenhouse emissions. So yes, there is a study going on. The problem they got is that since this production system really got a lot of attention in recent years, so their data, they're working on developing that database by which they can say this production system has less greenhouse gases or more greenhouse gases. So that is one of the reason is that their study is a little bit different from mine. Because I mean, I really don't bother the producers with any of the scientific questions, such as I don't say scientific, but environmentally sustainable. Any of those buzzwords which really get them off, because first getting on their field is a big task, and then again on top of that, with your second question, you're asking on the burning of the crop residue. We tried to do a survey a couple of years back, and it did not go well, in the sense that there was less participation on the producers. And then that is also another issue that's really other researchers are looking into it. But as far as I'm concerned, I try to do a survey, is that how do you get disposed of your rice stalks? And that survey didn't go anywhere, and it was pretty much, it was an initiative by Arkansas environmental, the state agency looking into the burning of rice stalks, but it did not go anywhere. So, that's where I am with those.
Thanks for your responses, and apologies if I took us a little off track there. I really do appreciate your work here.
No, that's fine. I mean, I actually designed the survey for that, so I'm quite familiar with the questions. And
Money, thank you so much, man. Wonderful presentation. Enjoyed it. Very interesting. Growing up, well, not growing up, but going to school in Louisiana, there's a lot of rice growing there, but I never learned much about the production of it. And I could see that it could be very costly to flood those fields, and then to be able to somehow take the water off. I don't know how that process looked, but it was something that is very interesting to see, I'm sure. Question for you is, when most of your data, is it collected via a mail survey, or are you collecting it in person, talking with the farmers and really writing down what they're telling you in terms of the amount of fertilizer that is used and the amount of water and so on and so forth? So how's that handled? Because you did mention that there were times when you went there to talk with the farmers, they that have been on other enterprises, working on other enterprises that they have, and just didn't have the time to speak with you. So could you give us an idea, are most of those, the data that is collected do an in-person survey, or is it a mail-in survey?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Chris. Majority, every information what we have in our crop enterprise budget is collected by talking to the producers, and it's one-to-one communication with the producers. Typically, we do that at end of the season, starting in the first week of October, and we run that pretty much communication with the producers via email. Majority of the times, it's a phone communication. And sometimes we really go on his farm and print out a budget and work with him. And that is the major part where we invest a lot of our resources. The other part is putting the flow meter, and recordings on those flow meters are done by county agents, and wherever, if possible, I have some of my graduate students helping me with that. So yes, I mean, pretty much 90% of the data is primary data. And that's one of the reason is that, do we have the data? The question is, we have been going on, we have been really following these producers for a very long period of time. And still at this point of time, this year we have 9 pair fields, and getting that 9 pair fields would pretty much take us 3 months to just get all that information together. So yes, it's quite challenging, and we get support from the county agents wherever the county agent has a good relationship with the farmer. But just working with the farmers, I really strongly believe that that if you go and talk to him and sit with him at least once in a typical growing season, I mean, that really builds up relationship, and then he's willing to share the information. So yes, it's primary data.
Okay. One more question for you. You mentioned that you tried to talk with the farmers and convince them to plant their different plots side by side, so that you could do your, you can easily do the, the analysis and things of that nature. But you know very well that there are sometimes that there are certain fields that are a little bit more productive than others, especially if you're looking at a previous year where you got very high yields one year from a plot, and then the next year it's just low. And then so I know some farmers will say, hey, at least let me kind of minimize my risk, by planning on, some areas that I know that has been very productive in the past. So when you're talking to them about using 2 plots and planting all of their stuff in those 2 areas, I mean, what do you do to convince them? I mean, how do you convince them? I mean, is it monetarily or what is it? I mean, it's a wonderful relationship that you have to have in order to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I was introduced to majority of the farmers through the irrigation engineer, the irrigation expert, Dr. Henry, and he introduced me to different farmers, and then I took it from there. And then majority of the times my frustration was that I used to go on his farm, and then he used to say, okay, let me share my production data with you. And all of a sudden he had some work to do. So I would drive 4 hours and I would be on his farm. And then he would say, oh, let me see where it is. And then he possibly he may be having another work, and he would just, say, okay, why don't we meet next time? When you drive 4 hours, and I mean, you have to be consistent with him. And at end of the day, I mean, you won't believe that me and Dr. Henry, we convinced this farmer to work with us. And then he came and he gave his experience, his presentation, working with us at Rice and Cotton Conference early this year. So I mean, it is that, you have to be really patient. And most important is that, he knows what my purpose is there. And now you asked, how did I do it? Well, actually, I prepared production budgets for him for another, he was growing medium grain rice, and I helped him in looking at his production budget. I mean, that is free of cost, okay?
Right.
And that is how he pretty much convinced me, okay, now I can give you 4 fields. You can have 2 paired comparison next to each other. And that's how really, now we have that working relationship.
Right.
But it came at a huge cost, in which I was for maybe pretty much 15-20 days. I was working on his 8 or 9 fields and just trying to make sure that, is he making profit? Is he making any money on those fields? I was just walking through his budgets, helping him, convincing him with his results. So yeah, it took a while. But again, you say, is he 100% going to do what you want him to do? No, he is not. He may do 50% of what you want to do. So that is quite challenging. And I have those challenges on day-to-day basis. But I mean, we got to do what we got to do. So yes, it is quite challenging.
Yeah. Dr. Mane.
Yeah.
My understanding is, if we compare if we compare two production systems and one uses less water than the other one, that could mean that this one is more efficient than the other one. That could also mean that it is less inefficient than the other one, in the sense that both are inefficient. So do you plan to calculate a water use efficiency?
Yes, that's what I'm telling you. Now, if you just go back to this slide, what we see is that the dotted lines is pretty much looking into water use. And when we look into water use efficiency, yes, you see this small wedge in between the blue dotted line and the red. So that is what it is telling, that 5 acre inches is something on average we are getting water savings. Now, one thing that is what's really not happening is that you need variety of tools to really have higher water use efficiency, such as you need to use moisture sensors. You need to really, you really need to have, you need to have your pump tested. You need to really look into every aspect of this irrigation system. And that's what is another part of research we are looking into, is that if this individual had used moisture sensors when he was planning, when he was irrigating, what would have been the difference? So that is another part of the study, and there are similar studies being done on the farm. But at the end of the day, what we need to make sure and convince the producer, okay, here the main target is the producer, is that you can save water at one time, and at the same time you can higher net returns. Now, he's having a yield drag of 5 bushels per acre. That yield drag, you have to justify that you are losing 5 bushels per acre. How can you justify that loss? You can justify that loss is that, well, you are saving money in terms of chemicals. You are saving money in terms of your, you don't have levees. So you're not preparing those levees. So again, yes, when we talk of efficiency, we are really focusing on row rice production system from an efficiency point of view.
Are there any additional questions about the money? Are there any questions for Mache? Dr. Mache? Well, if there are no additional questions, I want to thank everybody for participating, but I want you to join me in giving these two outstanding young professionals a hand for the great work, great research that they're doing. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is great. That is great. Well, thank you so much. And we'll definitely be calling upon you in the future. You all are doing great work. I thank you so much for participating in evaluating the graduate research competition that we had. Thank you so much. You've done a wonderful job. We really appreciate what you're doing, and we want to see you more and more involved in COSBAE. And so we're going to try to get you out there and get you involved and put you before everybody so that they could see the great talent that COSBAE has in these young professionals. So thank you so much again. And we really appreciate your time and your effort. We know that most of y'all are starting school up and you got quite a bit to do, given that, this pandemic and a lot of adjustments that have been made. So thank you so much for the time that you've taken out to prepare and to give this presentation. So once again, we thank you. And if that's it, then we can end here.
Okay.